Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have some exciting news. I'm about to share with you what I've been working on with FirstPlato for the last couple of weeks. Since the data out feature has been released for Forza Motorsport 7 on PC, we've been trying to figure out a way to calculate brand new force feedback and basically just try and make it better. I'll show you where we're at as of today. So basically, just to give you an idea of what we're looking at, these are some of the parameters that are in the data out feature. So the main one we're using to calculate force feedback is the tyre slip angle. Now we know that when the slip angle gets to 1.0, that value is peak slip angle. So in using that, we've generated some curves for mechanical torque, which is this red line, or it's actually kind of pink, it's probably hard to depict in the video. So that's our mechanical torque or mechanical trail, and then this black line is our pneumatic trail, which is the tyre. And in the final version, when it's finally released, everyone will be able to fine-tune and tweak these curves to however they want. If they don't want mechanical trail, they can simply pretty much turn it off, or if you want all mechanical trail, you can do that. You can tweak the tyre parameters, so if you want a really high drop-off value, you can get that. You can adjust obviously all the drop-off angles, the peak, like how much of that you want in the force feedback. You know, it's pretty endless the amount of customization you can do with this. So at the moment we're using a curve that looks something like this. This isn't exactly perfect. Obviously this is just a program I'm using to generate curves. The actual program used in that FirstPlato is made to use is slightly different, but this one just gives you a good visual representation of how much we can tweak these curves. So just looking at the graph again, so we can see that there's peak slip angle at 1 degree, and we can get realistic values where the force feedback, so this top line here is the total force feedback, so this is the torque from the mechanical torque and the pneumatic torque added together, which gives us our final force. As you can see, we can get a slight drop off in force before we're at the peak slip angle, so we can feel in the wheel when we're turning on maximum grip, whereas on the default force feedback this is actually a lot harder. It feels like the drop-off doesn't happen. If I just create a curve here that will represent that, where are we? So the drop-off doesn't feel like it happens until after 1 degree like this. So the force will build up, and then after 1 degree is when you'll start to get drop-off. And how severe the drop-off is depends on whatever sort of curve they're using in Forza. But that's just a general idea. So let's jump straight into the game and I'll show you how much better this force feedback really is. Now to demonstrate it, we're going to be taking a stock S13 Silvia and we're just going to drift it. Now drifting is a good example of force feedback because you get a wide variety of forces, and it generally gives you a very good idea of how much the wheel wants to self-align with what the car is doing. So quick look at the assists. We're running simulation steering, that's the big one, and pretty much everything else off because we're going to be drifting. So let's just jump straight to it. Enough talking. Let's show you what we've got so far. Now on the default force feedback, simulation steering is really quite hard to drive with, and especially to drift with, unless you've got a car like the Mustang that I made a long time ago, where it was purely tuned to try and drift on sim steering, whereas now, oops, a little bit too fast. Ooh. Alright, let's do it. So, first corner, just going to lift off, get some. You can see how much more responsive the wheel is. And I can rely on the wheel and just throw the car around on sim steering and drift it. as we come over that crest there. And First Plateau has implemented a really nifty feature where the suspension travel is actually affecting the load on the tyres that we're calculating the force from. So when we're accelerating, this force will get slightly lighter, and when we decelerate, when there's more weight on the front tyres, the steering will get slightly heavier. And this effect works for as you're going over bumps. As the suspension travels, it will vary the force, and it just makes the force feedback really come alive. And you can see I still get quite significant drop off when I'm understeering, so the wheel is quite light, whereas when I'm near peak slip or within peak slip, the wheel is quite heavy. So enough talking and more demonstrating. So we're stock, so we don't have a lot of power, but you know, I can just throw this around and the wheel just feels so much more natural than with the default force feedback. And on the default force feedback, when you're in a drift transition and you let the wheel go, it feels like the wheel just wants to rotate all the way to full lock and make you do a wicked tank slapper. Whereas now, if the wheel reaches the peak sort of correction angle, it just wants to make the car go straight, and it really feels it's fucking awesome. It makes driving a lot of the cars feel so much better. So we can go high speed drift entry, sim steering, and just throw it in. Lots of clutch because we don't have a lot of power. Oh man, as soon as I tested this version, that when First Plateau sent it to me, I was at work when he sent it to me. He said, "Oi, you there? You gotta test this." And I was like, "Man, I'm still at work." I got home, finally fired it up, applied it, and I was immediately just blown away at the level of forces that we're getting and how much better it feels. Simulation steering is now much more controllable. Even when you're just driving normal cars. I mean, I took a V8 supercar around Bathurst and I could almost drift that thing on sim steering. The force feedback is that much better. So I'll just shut up for a second and see if I can nail this entry into the first turn. That was better. But yeah, you can pretty much almost let the wheel align by itself, which you never could do before. You had to use normal steering, and you know, there's just this, it just wasn't possible to do this on sim steering before. But don't get me wrong, Forza's physics can still be a bit snappy, and weight transfers can happen really sudden. But I really believe this force feedback has just given me a whole new confidence in how I can drive the cars. Let's try get this entry one more time. A little bit bigger angle on the initiation. That's better. Didn't quite link them, but you know, we still had massive amounts of angle coming into that turn. Oop. And the slip curve we're using at the moment for this car, because I don't have access to tuning it, because these are only test versions and they're only using whatever I tell First Plateau to use. It's a slip curve that I made for pretty much a casual sort of racing or hot lapping sort of, where you get that drop off just before peak grip and then it'll continue to drop off after that, so you get a lighter wheel when you're understeering. Now on the default force feedback, if you had that sort of setup and you try to drift with it, the wheel would almost not move at all. Whereas here, even with this setup, the wheel is super responsive and I can still drift it really, really well. All the clutch. I'll get back onto the start-finish straight and I'll see if I can just like Arab drift down the straightaway, just relying on the wheel. But you should be able to see straight away that the steering, the force feedback response is just, you know, it is tenfold better than what it used to be with the stock force feedback. You know, as we come over bumps like this, we get different forces as the suspension loads up and the weight comes off the tyre, as the slip angle and suspension travel just really make everything come alive. Getting a bit at big angle, so we still have to be careful of big weight transfers when we're at high angle. Almost linked it down, but as you can see, trying to do a mungie like that on the default force feedback just would not work on sim steering. In the Mustang that I tuned for drifting on sim steering, I had to do some really silly things with that car, like bump the tyre pressures at the front really high to make it really understeering, really high ARB settings on the front, again to make it really understeery. It's got an almost open diff, so when the car is reasonably straight, it tries to spin one wheel instead of two to try get it to straighten up easier. You know, all those tuning settings that just make the car pretty unrealistic. You wouldn't really want that in a drift car at all, but it's kind of what you had to do in order to get the car to drift on simulation steering. Whereas now this is just bone stock, untuned, and I can just throw it around. And the force feedback gets heavy there as the slip angle is right near peak, or just before peak. Yeah, it's just a whole new confidence, and it's completely transformed the way Forza feels. And I was just over the moon when, as soon as I tried it. And at the moment, FirstPlato is working on adding the vibration settings and making them dynamic. So the frequency, if I can get the words out of my mouth, oh, there we go again. Frequency will change depending on vehicle speed or more the wheel rotation speed. So when you drive on a rumble strip at low speed, you get a low frequency vibration, and then when you go over at a high speed or just increasing speed, you know, the vibration frequency will update according to the vehicle speed or wheel rotation speed. So I can feel, as the suspension's moving up and down there, I can feel those little knocks through the force feedback. Another cool thing I noticed earlier is if I set the car stationary, I mean if we just put this on here, as the car rocks side to side, I don't know if you can see that, but the wheel rocks. There's just some of the really cool effects that were unintentional, but because we're calculating from the physics, things like this just happen naturally. Oops, get rid of that. try one more mad drift entry into this first turn, and that's going to wrap up the video. As you can see, this is still work in progress, but what we've achieved so far I think it's absolutely amazing, and I can't wait for everyone to get their hands on it and try it out. But after this entry it's going to be the end of the video, so thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!